Everybody, welcome to Developer Student Club. Today we have a Flutter workshop session with a guest speaker, Sergio, who is a software engineer from Workday. Before we start with the workshop, just a few announcements. So, yes, we were on a break for like 3 or 4 weeks. So we will hope to have sessions again in the coming weeks. We might break for the winter break, but probably we'll be back in January to have competitions like Google Hashcode, and then also the Developer Student Club Solution Challenge. That's a challenge among all the Developer Student Clubs across the world. That's gonna start probably in the second week of January. So that is something to look up for. And also next week there's a 190% chance of having a speaker session with another speaker from Google. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so let us start with the workshop. So off to you, Sergio.
Thanks, Harris. Hello, everybody. I'm just gonna try to share my entire screen. So. I'm afraid I need to. Okay. Can you see my screen by any chance?
Yep, it's loading. Okay, it's there now.
Perfect. Yeah. So, hello everybody. As Harsh, I'm sorry for butchering your name, said, my name is Sergio. I am a mobile software engineer at Workday, and I guess many of you haven't heard about Workday. We do mobile there, and iOS and Android. We do have a small team though. Most of the team is in California, where the headquarters of the company are. If you have any question that is unresolved during the workshop, if you have any question that is unresolved, or you want to reach for anything, just this is my Twitter handle. And also you can find me with this handle on Medium. We're going to share the slides in the end, so don't worry for anything. All the information will be there. The agenda, I hope all those times are correct, and I hope we'll be able to have it in an hour and a half. The last exercises are sort of a little bit of open, and I would like to ask everybody just to try to keep the session very interactive, so don't feel shy to ask questions on the chat, which I cannot see while I'm sharing. Just putting here on the side. Feel free to have to pop all the questions on the chat, but also unmute yourself, and let's have an interactive session. So we're going to talk about what is Flutter and Dart. I'm not sure if anybody here is familiar with this. But we'll go a little bit through the beginning of this, right? Through the basics. I want to really talk about what can you do with Flutter, right? It's not about it's a very cool technology, but more about what Flutter enables you to do. I'm also going to be honest and discuss a little bit the pros and the cons. We are going to go through the installation and troubleshooting, although I hope most of the people already have it installed. If not, we can address any issue during the session, but there is an alternative called Dartpad that we'll mention later. We are going to create a new Flutter project and go through the example code that is there, and then we're going to enhance that and add something over the code as part of the workshop. So I'm hoping it's not too basic for everybody, as I know people may have different backgrounds and have done Flutter before or not, or done mobile, and so on. Any questions so far? No, okay. So I cannot see the chat while I'm presenting full screen. So Harsi, if there is any question just that needs to be addressed, let me know, please.
Yep, sure, no problem.
Okay, so what is Flutter? Flutter is actually many things. It's a toolkit. We can download it as part of the SDK. What is a toolkit means that we can just use it as a tool in our programs to render things. It uses Dart under the hood, and we're going to see what's Dart in a few slides. And it renders on something called Skia. Now, Skia is a rendering engine. That's a little bit of the power of Flutter, and one of the reasons why it can render anywhere. They haven't even bring this into the Nintendo Switch as well. As a sample of what can you do with Skia. But basically, it's a rendering engine. You can think about that as a web browser, right? Like you can open a web browser anywhere, and it will render a web page. So this is very similar. If you are able to bring a Skia to any platform, you can render Flutter content, right? There are some cuts around this where there may be some plugins that you're using for Flutter that are specific for one platform, like mobile. So you cannot use that code into web or desktop. But the underlying logic is that if you can bring a Skia to one platform, you can have Flutter on that. It is multi-platform, as I said, thanks to that. So currently, Flutter has, I think it's already out of beta, but it has support for desktop platforms. So you should be able to install a Flutter application in Linux, Windows, and Mac. Obviously, it started as a mobile platform, right? So you have Android and iOS, and it's also compatible with web. So it seems to be really the first truly multi-platform toolkit that is out there, right? And it works quite well. It's fast. It's relatively fast. And I say relatively because when you're talking about cross-platform libraries, frameworks, toolkits, whatever, they are easily not the fastest, right? Like we have seen examples with Cordova, PhoneGap. I don't know if anybody, I hope that you guys haven't have to go through that, but it's painfully slow anywhere. React Native was one of the latest solutions. Is fairly fast in the UI side, but JavaScript limits you to one single thread while processing on a device. And JavaScript is not that fast. So for what Flutter is able to achieve is really fast, and it's easily achievable to have a UI running at 60 frames per second on a device. And also uses something that is getting popular now, that is declarative programming. So all the UI is written in a declarative way rather than imperative. And you may have this heard this word before lately because Swift UI and Jetpack Compose that are for iOS and Android relatively are using declarative programming, are declarative programming libraries that are coming now, and it's the new approach for building mobile applications. All the devs are very hyped about that because it really makes a difference. Flutter was the first one to bring it. You could argue that React Native was their first, but it's a little bit of an HTML layout. Anyway,
we have
as
a
I
question
said,
here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Jack is asking if have most software development companies have changed from native development to Flutter for Android, or is Java and Kotlin still as popular as they were for Android?
Yeah. So that's a very good question on how the market is out there. As far as I'm concerned, there are very little companies that have changed to Flutter. I think new companies are taking Flutter. Startups are taking Flutter much easily. But for big companies where they already have an ongoing application, it's a costly change. There are some reasons behind that as well. You have to put to bring everybody on board this. Like if not all the devs wants to move to Flutter, you're not going to be able to move to Flutter. And we even in the applications that we have, where Swift and Kotlin has been out there for a few years already, we still have so much code in Java and not Objective-C because it's legacy, right? And even migrating that to the new technologies is a slow process for some of the big corps. So I would say that the picture will change, but very, very slowly, to be honest. But it's true that there are out there some examples of companies that are starting to use this, and some of them have written very good articles. One of them is eBay, that made an application for selling and buying cars purely in Flutter. BMW uses Flutter as well for I think it's for the dashboards in the car and the applications that they have. Tencent and so on, right? Google, of course, is starting to use Flutter in some applications, and I think that the biggest example is the new Google Pay, the redesign that is coming soon. I think it has been released in the States already, but it's purely in Flutter. So it's something that is gonna take time, but once you get into the big core world, you will see that everything takes time, and it's mostly up to the startups to get this. To adopt these new technologies, right? And that's something actually I'm going to mention later as well. So, but that's a very good question. Thanks. So, as I was saying, Flutter is a framework, a library that runs on top of Skia. So this green part in here will be the Skia or the Dart VM. I don't want to get too much into details there because Dart compiles in a few different ways. But basically, you'll have your code, you have the Flutter framework, you have the Flutter engine, is where it's going to be rendered, and then you have your application runner for iOS or Android and the hardware. Because of this, the green and the yellow box, you probably have noticed already during the installation that you not only have to install Flutter for the website, but depending on the platform that you're going to develop, you will have to install the associated tools. So for Android, you will need the Android SDK. For iOS and macOS, you will need the Xcode. If you want to deploy on Windows, you need Visual Studio, not the Visual Studio Code, but the big brother one. And if you want to deploy for Linux, you need a few packages that I cannot remember right now, but it's quite a few libraries that you need to build for Linux. And I think that for web, you don't really need anything. That's the only one. Right, and that's actually the reason there. So I guess everybody already has gone to the Flutter website, but it's there for more details. Dart is the programming languages that you are going to use in Flutter, and Dart has been there before Flutter was done. It's actually, I believe, it's Danish. It was made in Denmark, and it was done for UI rendering. The idea of Dart was to be able to replace JavaScript on the web, and that's actually one of the reasons why you can make a Flutter application on web, is because Dart is able to compile into JavaScript. It was developed in mind of having in mind to try to have a language that would be very productive for the developer and fast on all the platforms. And again, when I mean fast of all the platforms, just bear in mind that it's never going to be as fast as a native language running on the platform, right? But it is fairly fast for what it achieves, which is pretty remarkable. You would probably, if you start with Flutter now, you will probably start seeing lots of blog posts about null-safety coming and so on. I think the current version that we have is, I think this is wrong. It's 2.12, not 12. And I think the current version is 2.10. I will fix this. But basically, they're including null-safety and null-safety feature in the Dart language. So you will be able to have optionals and so on the same way than Kotlin and Swift and probably all the languages, right? Dartpad is a very nice tool that is out there. And this is what we're going to use as a backup if somebody wasn't able to install an environment for developing on Flutter. So this is a web application, basically. you're able to put any code, and it will render the application. Even if it doesn't need to be just Dart code. It's not going to output just the console log or the prints of the code, but it's actually going to render the whole application in here, like you can see here on the right side. So this is the Flutter sample application that we're going to work on, and yeah, the link is in here. Yeah. So if you are not haven't been able to install it, just look for Dart, and we'll use that for the rest of the workshop. But again, what can you do with
Sorry to
Flutter?
interrupt. Can you also take us through the installation process, because I'm not really sure if a lot of people did install or not. So
yeah, we'll go through that as well. I have it on the slides. No worries.
Okay, thank you.
Sergio, is that IDE or text editor?
So it is whatever you want, right? For Flutter, it actually doesn't matter as far as you use the right Flutter plugins. So Flutter will run all the commands through command line. The things like you can use your text editor like Atom or Visual Studio Code for running those command lines for you instead through the Flutter plugins, and it will also have syntax highlighting and some other features that are very nice. Or you can use an IDE like Android Studio or IntelliJ. My recommendation will be Android Studio because that way you will also have a way to install and keep up to date the Android SDK. If you are thinking about, if you have a Windows or a Linux machine. If you have a Mac, you may also have installed Xcode on the side and use Visual Studio Code if you want. I will show both of them, but it really matters which one. I also said I'm not sure if there are plugins for Atom and Electron, but it does work very well with Visual Studio Code. Yes, Flutter SDK contains Dart already, so you don't need to install Dart separately. Okay, so as I said, we're gonna go through the installation process as well together. It's just a little bit more ahead, and we'll give some time to get it set. What I want to highlight is what Flutter is good for, right? Why would you go for Flutter rather than for pure Android, pure iOS, or pure Windows development, or pure web development? Well, for me, it builds everywhere, right? You can have the same Flutter application running in web, in desktop, in mobile, and I think this is one of the points why a single developer may want to do a Flutter application, or a startup may start a Flutter application. People is very reticent though from the previous history of the cross-platform frameworks where the performance hasn't been great, but those performance issues are nowhere to be seen in Flutter. And you actually can craft very beautiful experiences. And I'm not sure if anybody has seen some of the videos of the Flutter Interact from last year, but they were presenting something called Flutter vignettes, I think is the pronunciation. So there were some UI showcases of what can you do with Flutter. The code is public in GitHub, and I have the links at the end, and it's really remarkable. There's actually a quick video here. I hope it can be seen correctly. So this is a really a truly showcase of what can you do with Flutter, and I really encourage everybody to go and check it later. At the end, all the samples are open source. Some there are quite complex as well, but it shows you what you can do with Flutter. You can install them on your phone to try them out. It's really impressive. Really. Of course, it takes quite a big amount of work to get to that level.
Jack has another question. Like, if you have Linux and Windows, which operating system you would recommend?
I actually don't have a recommendation for that. It really depends on what you like. I do Flutter on Mac and on Windows, for instance. I don't have any Linux machine at the moment, but for what I heard, it works fairly well. My recommendation is whatever you feel more comfortable with. But I haven't had any problem on Windows, if that's any of your questions. It is true that on Windows I need to use the what's it called, the power command line rather than bash, and I don't feel so comfortable with that. So if you feel comfortable with it or not, it may be one of the decision points, but it works fairly well everywhere. And I believe that Visual Studio Code is available on Linux as well as Android Studio. Cool. Thanks everybody for keeping this interactive as well. I really appreciate it. So why I personally like Flutter, and this is the same slide than before, I know, and I said that Flutter allows you to build everywhere, but the way I see it, it allows me to develop for everyone. As a single developer for building some side applications or side projects, I don't want to be limited to one single platform. So that's why I've always been looking for some of these cross-platform frameworks. But to be honest, Flutter has hit the right spot. It's an amazing developer experience. It's really the best. You can have this hot reload, live preview, however you want to call it, where you keep changing the code and you can see it in real time, those changes without having to reload the application, which you may think for a small application is not too much, but for big applications like you may have in your company, a build can suppose more than 5 minutes, and that's it totally breaks the flow, right? And it makes it very slow. You make a small UI change and you want to see how it feels. You have to build for 5 minutes and I'm just going to change that and rebuild for 5 minutes and so on. Swift UI and Jetpack Compose are changing a little bit the image in here, but I have them both. It's nowhere near as good as Flutter is. And the other thing is that Flutter has an amazing community. I have some of the links for the Flutter community. But they're really good. Like, I haven't found a community as good as them. Everybody is really helpful and very supportive. And it just feels very, very well. What you may find though when starting to do this is that Dart is a little bit behind. It's not as nice as Kotlin or Swift. So don't have your expectations as Dart is this miraculous panacea, because it is not. But it's getting there. It's getting there. Dart wasn't getting as much love as it should until Flutter arrived. So I think it's catching up, and with things like Null-safety coming soon, it's just getting up there. But you will see it looks a little bit more like a C/Python type of language. And then the other thing is one of those questions were like, is Flutter starting to be used in the companies and in the corporate world? Well, you have another problem is that not everybody may be on board on this, and they're very light-hearted and native devs that they don't want to try other frameworks, or they only want to specialize on native. So when you propose to use Flutter, this is probably the reaction that you will get from some people. And if you cannot get everybody on board, it is very difficult. So that's why I think some of the small startup companies starting to do Flutter, which they have very nice applications out there, will start changing the picture. My humble advice, anyway, is just go with whatever you feel resonates with you, right? If you don't want to use Flutter because you don't like something and you like Kotlin or you like something else, feel free. All these frameworks are awesome, but to be honest, what it makes it awesome is that you really like them. So don't feel any pressure to go with the hype or the wave or what's out there, but do what you really like instead. So let's get hands-on. How we install Flutter. So has everybody been able to install it, or I guess not, right? And get more or less how many people were able to get it? No? Nobody? Okay. So I'm not sure what machine you're using. Let's suppose that you use Windows or Mac for the time being. But I think it works fairly similar. You have to download the Flutter SDK and unzip it, and then you will add it to your path. Basically, there's a tool to run. Once Flutter is on your path, you can run a tool called Flutter Doctor, and if you have missing things, it will let you know. So, for instance, you could define an Android SDK command line tools, so it will tell you, right? Or Flutter is working perfectly, but they are not device connected, so you cannot run the application. For Mac, it's a little bit of the same. You will just unzip it and add it to your path, and Flutter Doctor will tell you something is wrong. As I said, there are two steps on this, right? One step is to get Flutter, and the other one is to get your native tools ready. So if you're using Mac, you can, I think it should be at the bottom, yeah, platform setup. So if you're using Mac, you can install Xcode, and it will tell you here how to do it. You can also install Android Studio if you're using Mac, doesn't matter. If you're using Windows, you can only use Android Studio for setting up the Android SDK. Later, you can use Visual Studio Code with Flutter.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you also please share the link in the chat so everybody can just get it easily?
Yes.
If you don't mind, please. Thank you.
Good point. Cool. Okay. So I see two people have it installed. Maybe the question is, has anybody not been able to install it or to have it running? If so, we can go through the installation process together. Like I can be here 10 minutes until everybody gets things set up, and I can help with troubleshooting any issue that you may have. The other option was to use Dartpad. So I will copy the link in here too. Then you will always have. I'm gonna share the code that we're gonna do as well. So the other option is just do this for the workshop and then try to set it up yourself. If you use Dartpad, in here at the right you have samples, and then the example that we're gonna work on is the contract sample. So you click on that, it will load that example, click run, and you will see it on the right side. Okay, I see Sophie hasn't been able to. Yeah, definitely. As Har said, we can try to install the things in the background and use that part in the meantime. I think we will be good on time though. I was counting with some time for installing this, so if anybody sees we can work around that, because I have three exercises that are fairly small, but I want you guys trying them yourselves. So I think we should have time for everything anyway. But cool. If everybody is comfortable, we can use Dartpad in the time being. And as answered one of those questions before, you may need an IDE. Visual Studio Code is a very light solution, so I'm actually going to be using this one for the session. But feel free to use Android Studio or IntelliJ. I normally use Android Studio because the reason behind this is just I'm more familiar with the shortcuts, as I do some Android on my free time as well and at work. I'm not sure if I've mentioned this, but I'm actually an iOS developer at Workday. So I just I'm starting to do some Android as well. But yeah, Flutter is only my side passion. Unfortunately, we don't use it at work, although we have been, and we are still pushing for making a case for that. So
we have a question from Yasser. He's not able to get the emulator working on VS Code.
Okay. Do you have also Android Studio set up? Okay. So one of the things that you may want to do is, let's recap. I mean, if you open Android Studio, and don't look at any of this code, please. Personally, it's not work codes, but I'm not sure if it's in a good shape. So if you can go to the SDK manager first, and you need to make sure that you have an SDK installed. Probably the SDK tools are installed as well, but you probably need to set up an emulator if you haven't done before. So just click in the AVD manager, and you have in here a button to create a virtual device. So you can create a Pixel 4 image, for instance. You choose the Android version that you want to add. You can say, okay, if it's something installed that would be already, it will be quicker. If you want to download the latest, feel free. Just will take a little bit more time and space in your hard drive. But once you have a device, probably should be able to launch it. So if you open Visual Studio the first time with Flutter, and you don't have an emulator set up, the launching will probably fail. That's also one of the things why I like Android Studio as well. So when I click run on the book, I should get prompt what simulator I want. So I have an iOS simulator, and all those devices that I have set up in the AVD manager are in here. I don't think you need Android Studio to set up the AVD manager, but I think it just makes things much easier since everything is there, right? Cool. So after opening everything, go back to the presentation. I think I mentioned this already, that you will need those mobile SDKs. If you don't want to deploy in mobile and you want to deploy in macOS, for instance, you will still need Xcode. So I think it should be somewhere in here. I definitely saw it. The web setup, I don't think it has the requirements. There was definitely a place for building the application on Windows, for instance. So on Mac, you need Xcode for building on native, and on Windows you need, if you're interested, Visual Studio Community 2019. This one is free. This is an IDE, it's not Visual Studio Code. And it will just have all the tools for running applications on Windows. But yeah, everything is inside the documentation. If you look up for Flutter deploy,
I have a personal suggestion. Like, I feel the Android emulator is very slow sometimes. So even trying it out on an actual device is good. Like,
Yeah,
I usually prefer
that's
that.
very true. Android emulators are not the fastest. They have gotten fast with time. Like you should have seen a few years ago how slow they were. If you have a Mac, Xcode will be the iOS emulator will be faster. Xcode installation will probably be slower though, because it takes a very long time to download Xcode. But yeah, that's true. If you have a device, you can just plug it in. The AV manager should recognize your device. So, for instance, if you are in Android Studio, your device should appear in this list of devices. If you're in Visual Studio, when you run the launch, it will ask you for the device. As I said, there's a desktop support for Flutter. So if you don't want to do that, you want to deploy on Windows, Mac, or Linux, here are the requirements. It's not there. Website. So I'm going to copy paste this on the chat.
I'm actually downloading all the staples via the Flutter Doctor at the moment for Linux on Ubuntu, and it is taking forever.
Yeah, so we can use the Dart path in the meantime then. Maybe it can be good if we all use Dart path then. I'm just going to show very quickly, I think I have it on the slide as well. Yeah, so I have it in here. Well, as I said before, wherever you choose, you will need the Flutter plugins. So you go to Android Studio. Probably when you open a Flutter project, it will ask you, we need these Flutter plugins. You will need to install these plugins for having code completion, syntax highlighting, and so on, and having some of those options, or creating a Dart file. And among them, you will also have in here the option to create a new Flutter project. Right? It's going to be a different project than Android. The same goes for Visual Studio Code. So, So I think what are the plugins? So you will need the Flutter and the Dart plugins in here. And they do very cool things as well, right? Like if I hover on top of the class, it will give me the documentation. Command click or control click will allow me to navigate to that particular documentation, and so on. So I think it's absolutely worth it to have those plugins. But again, you don't have to be limited in here. If you find another solution that works better for you, you can always use the command line to create a Flutter project or to run Flutter. So those slides on how to create a Flutter project are in here. Forgot in Visual Studio Code. If you do Command P, just have the card. You can have the option of creating a new Flutter project from here, and it's very guided. And out of the studio is what I showed you. And as I said, in Dart path, you have to go to samples and open the counter sample. So if we're all in the same page and we go through Dart path, whoever hasn't been able to install it, this is what you are going to find. If you create a Flutter project from the first time, you're going to find the same. So I'm actually going to create a new Flutter project in here as well. So you can see it from the beginning. So Flutter new project, Flutter workshop. I think I already have one. Put it in here. And it just creates a new project, right? So it will be running here Flutter create, iOS language trip, Android language calling, etc. And this is actually the command line that you will be running yourself if you want to create a Flutter project, and you can actually see the console output from running this command line. So as I said, the plugins really run on the command line. That's why you actually need to have Flutter in your path. Once a project is created, and although we're going to work on that part, I just want to show you what's the project structure. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, 1 second. You'll have some folders for Dart, configuration, IntelliJ, and then you will have a folder for your Android project. So you can actually open this Android project in Android Studio and only run the Android project. You have this iOS folder, which you can actually open in Xcode, but you have this lib folder where your application code is going to go. What is going to happen is that when you compile this project, all the code from your library will be compiled and will be linked to the Flutter runner, that is in the iOS and Android projects. But these are the two native projects that you are going to be really using, right? This is the underlying Android and iOS platform projects. You have, if you have done React Native before, you probably have found a very similar folder schema where you have the native application folders inside. If you add support for Flutter Web, you'll have another folder in here for the web. And I haven't personally tried desktop, but I'm 99.9% sure that you will have the desktop folders in here as well, for whatever desktop environment you enable. The reason you have these folders is because you may still want to do particular configurations on the projects themselves. You may want to do code signing, and well, you have to need to do code signing in your Android and iOS project in order to publish them. You may want to change the icon of the library, so you actually need to change it in the iOS folder or on the Android folder, and so on. You do have a test folder as well. So Flutter is extremely good at testing because you can test your application. You can in unit tests, or you can also test the widgets separately. So you can also test the UI components that you have built. It basically allows you to test everything very easily. And the last thing that you need to know is the pubspec.yaml. And this file is like the, I don't remember what's called for JavaScript, like the npm file where you specify the libraries that you want, or you're using Cocoa Pods for iOS, and so on. I don't have another example right now for another development environment, but this is our configuration file for the Flutter side of it, right? So we're going to tag our Flutter version for the project that we're going to release. We're going to set what Flutter SDK version we are using, and we can change this to use a higher one. You know, it can be like the minimum can be 10, or we can set a beta in here. We will add our dependencies, our development dependencies, and we can add assets that we're going to use. So if we, this is actually very important, if we need to add an image or a JSON file that we're going to fetch locally for use, we need to declare them in here. You can actually declare the folder itself where these assets are going to go rather than picking it one by one. But nevertheless, you need to say that there are certain assets in this folder. We want to include them in the project. If you're trying to, I don't know, if you put some images in the project and you are just desperate because the application doesn't show the images or crashes when it tries to load the images, most likely you have forgotten to add those images in here, or you have done it, then you have to figure out what's the path to get them, especially they're in subfolders and so on. Fonts will be another type of asset, and they're declaring here. This file is heavily documented, so it's very self-guided and so on. We're not going to need to change it for our example. I just want you to know why it matters. And you actually don't need to see anything else in this project. Just the library, the lib folder will have our main.dart, And this is the same file that you will be seeing in your path when you open the sample. So if you go back in here, this sample project that has an application, homepage, etc. is exactly the same one that it goes in here. And if I run this on my iOS simulator, which I should have started before. This sample application is very well commented as well. I'm gonna remove the comments just to have the code a little bit condensed, so it's easier to go through. I don't think it's so commented in the Dart path side, but when you create a project, there are lots of documentation. So this is very handy for getting into Flutter. I'm just gonna remove them. So I remove all the comments, and there's a nice feature in Flutter that is when you save, it will run Dart formatter. So all the code will get formatted. So if I add intros in here and I save, the code is formatted automatically with the same formatter. So if you are working in a team, it's very good to avoid issues. The reason why this is happening, though, or the reason why they added this automatic formatter is because, unfortunately, when you build an UI with Flutter, you have a very, very nested structure. So you can see here, this is a structure that goes several levels through parentheses and brackets, right? So it's fairly easy to get lost in here in what is at what level. And you have, you're working with somebody that is using a different style on how to lay out this kind of a structure. It may just get very complicated and having lots of conflicts. So that's on there. In Android Studio, I still have it open. Yeah. In Android Studio, you can go to Preferences, and there is a format and save property. Is in here, format code and save. So on Visual Studio, code seems to be enabled automatically. In Android Studio, you have to enable it yourself. I do highly recommend it. It's really handy because you don't want to have to format those nested structures yourself. And if by any chance you end up with a mess in a couple of lines because you were experimenting, you just save the file and it gets formatted automatically. It's really, really handy. So the Flutter application loaded in here. This is the sample application. It's exactly the same one that you have in Dartpad, where it's just simply a counter. So you keep pressing, and it just keeps increasing the counter. So I'm going to go through what the application body is made of. There are no questions so far. I'm still online. Okay, yeah, perfect. Cool. So actually, I can do it in here. So we are using our part, everybody. So we're gonna have you forget about the bottom here. A Flutter application always starts with an app, right? We're gonna have, like many programs, we have a main function. There is this one. It returns nothing, and it just runs an application. This application can be mostly anything. In this case, it's a widget. Okay, I don't want you thinking about the stateless widget. Just it's a widget, and I will mention later what's a stateless and a stateful widget. And so this class, my app, builds a material application. Any widget in Flutter needs to override a build method that will build the UI. Right? So there's this. I didn't have this plan as part of the workshop, so hopefully it won't go wrong. But if I create in here class my component extends stateless widget. For using stateless widgets, I need to import material.dart. For widgets.dart is imported automatically in this case. If you have Android Studio, Alt or Option Intro will give you the quick options for doing so. But yeah, so I'm creating a new component, right? And I automatically can see that it's missing the concrete implementation of the build method. So if I fix the problem, it creates this override build method, right? So all the widgets are going to have this build method, and it's always override from the class that we are extending. So this is exactly what we're seeing here. Okay, so we're extending a widget, and we have a build method, and our build method is just going to return an application that is a material application. This is a component that is already given in material Dart. That is going to have a title. Is going to show okay. This is you will see in some of the Flutter applications this banner in here that says the book. I don't know if you can see it. So this is just to not show the banner. It's kind of handy because then you will know if your application is in the book mode when if you saw it on your phone and you don't remember if it's a release or a debug build, it will be able to tell you. It's going to have a theme. So Flutter, of course, has support for themes and dark mode and so on. And a material application can do many things, and you can have roots and so on. But for the sample and for what you have to focus is that it has a home page, and that home page is going to be another widget, right? And this widget has a title in here. We can call it Hello Flutter Workshop. And if we run it, this title just changed, right? So this home page is actually what we're seeing. Okay, we are not seeing the application itself. The application is, you can think about it as a container. We are seeing a homepage, and this homepage is also a widget. And this brings me to the point of Flutter that everything, absolutely everything in Flutter is a widget, right? And that's one of the main points in Flutter. Everything is a widget. And I know you don't believe me, but there are things that cannot be widgets. Well, everything is a widget in here. So the homepage is in here at the bottom. What you will also, for instance, sorry, this is not the project, it's this one. So if we go to the Visual Studio code, it's the same code, right? Like we have our application and we have our page. Normally, when you work in Flutter, the main file will only have the application. And then you will have in here another folder called screens, scenes, pages, whatever, how people call them depending on the projects, or there may be a different architecture, and that will probably hold this page. Okay, so if you open another project or you visit another project and you only see this, is the most normal thing, right? It's just for an example. They're putting everything together to make it easier. So let's come back to Dartpad. So what is this homepage? So this homepage is also a widget, as we said before. In this case, it's a stateful. And I'm going to make a break in here and go back to the slides. And I'm going to talk about what's a stateful, stateless, and what's a state. So we only have stateless widgets and a stateful widget. And a stateless widget doesn't have a mutable state that I can change. You can think about it as a widget is this entity that may have properties or not. Okay. If it doesn't have properties, you can think about it as, for instance, a card layout where we have a title and an image, right? That widget doesn't need to modify those property values, right? Like it probably is the parent that it says, oh, inject that the title is, I don't know, Flutter workshop, and that the image is this URL. And it doesn't need to worry about modifying those properties because it's the parent that defines them. So it only renders what the parent gives them. The stateful widgets, on the other hand, do have a state, and they can modify the properties on this state. So the state is this mutable state, right? The main example of this is actually that is actually this counter application. So this is a widget that whenever we press this button, this changes, right? So this seems like a widget that is modifying properties within itself, right? So we press in here, and there's a state that has a counter, and whenever we press, we update the state of the counter, and our application renders that. So that's the main difference about stateless widgets. Well, that's the big difference between stateless widgets and stateful widgets. The rest of the differences is how they are built as well. So when you build a stateful widget, and I don't want you maybe get into confusion on this, so maybe this is too much information that you will still be seeing, but when you build a stateful widget, you build it in two parts, right? So you declare the stateful widget, and then you need to, this is an override property as well, you need to create a state for that widget. Normally the convention is that that state is sort of like a private class, right? So we use that as underscore, and we use the same naming convention. So my homepage will be my homepage state, which makes it a little bit more confusing in my view, because then you see my homepage all over the place, and don't know what's the state and what's the widget. And so we have to create this new state. So we are extending that too. So we have two classes basically that we have done for a stateful widget, where a stateless widget is only one single class. This counter in here is going to be our state, and whenever we want to update an state, we need to do it through a method called setState. If you have done React or React Native, but even React.js, this state works the same, right? In React, you have an internal state. You have to pragmatically say update this state for these properties. So it's exactly the same. We need to say that we want to update the state on the counter. It will have another variable in here, counter. When we set the state, we are only modifying counter, not my second counter. So we do need to specify the values that we want to modify. When the state changes, Flutter will go through the widget, and it will re-render the the child that needs to reload, right? So we have a text in here that uses the value of the counter. I just need to refresh. I know this looks like a lot of, like, Jesus, there are so many, scaffold, up bar, center, column. We'll go through all of them. But yeah, as you can see, everything is a widget, right? Everything that is in here highlighted is a widget. So this, when we want to present an application with this title bar, we use an scaffold widget. So it already has a property for app bar. An app bar is another widget, and we can set the text, right? This text is the one that we receive as a property here. This scaffold has a body, and our body will have a center, which is a widget rather than a property. Padding will be a widget, and something that you will say, oh, why padding is like, padding normally is a property in many UI paradigm, but in here it's a widget. We'll have a column, and this column may have children that are going to be text, right? And move this, and this scaffold also has a floating nothing button property, which allows us to have a floating nothing button in here, right? Okay, so probably you have lots of questions, but I think the best is that you get familiar with the code. I think the best is that you start browsing through this, and start understanding that how is this structure, what each thing does. And I want you to do actually one quick exercise. So I'm gonna show you what I want, and then I'm gonna give some time for getting that done. All the code is gonna be given later, so don't worry for that. What I want is to have a second button that is gonna decrease the state. Okay. So maybe that's too big. So what I want is a second floating nothing button. Unless we have something like children that accepts an array of widgets, we can only have one single widget. So what we do when we want to have more widgets together is to group them. One nice thing of using these Flutter plugins is that if you click in here, you can actually wrap this widget onto another one. So what I'm going to do is to wrap it with another widget. That's going to be a row. Okay. Actually, that didn't wrap it very well. Can I wrap it with row? Yeah. Why broke the format? Yeah, wrap it with row. Perfect. So you put that widget inside a children list, and now I can have another widget. I could copy this one, put it in here, and we have two buttons. They have been moved though, because row is taking all this space and it doesn't know where to locate the widgets. But if we go into row, we have loads of documentation here, right? Very, very extensive. The documentation in widget is incredible. But they mentioned something called cross-axis alignment and main axis alignment. And that's something that row and column uses with our widget. So we can change I'm going to leave it in here on the side so you can see how the application changes. Main axis alignment. I'm going to put them at the end where they were originally. You can see I just saved the file and everything changes in here. I don't have to reload the application, which is incredible. And the last thing that we can do is they're quite close together. So we can put some space between. So there are two options in here. We can either wrap them with a padding, for instance, but then we'll have to wrap both of them with a padding and make sure that the padding is right. Or what we can do is to add another widget in here called size box and give it a width. So it will be an invisible widget in the middle that's going to have a certain distance. Maybe 16 is too much, 18 is perfect. So I'm trying to slowly introduce some of the widgets for you. Just you have to remember row and main axis alignment so far. The only thing that we can do is, well, the buttons are the same and they're actually doing the same action. We're just gonna change the buttons. Actually, I'm not sure if it's removed. Yeah, it's removed. It's a minus. And we're gonna change the color. So now this is slightly different, but it's still increasing the button. This tooltip in here is if there's a material property. If you long press the button to have a tooltip, so it will tell you what it does. This is more an accessibility feature. So we're going to put it called decrease. And we can see that they are actually doing the same action because they are both incrementing the counter. What we're going to do is to have a decrease counter method. It's going to be doing the same. And it's going to reduce the counter instead. So when I call this in here, the counter will decrease. Okay. Now, I'm going to stop sharing for a second. And I would like you folks trying. And if you have any question or any problem, I'm here to ask. It's also the first time I run a workshop online, so I'm not sure how the format is gonna work. But hopefully we can all get the same point. It's the same. I can always see thumbs up or thumbs down if everybody's up to the exercise. So just let me know when you finish, and it would be nice if you just share some pictures of that.
Also, if anybody needs any help, they can also screen share, and we can probably sort things out.
So I'm gonna leave 10 minutes until 20 past, if that's all right.
Can you share the starter code before adding the second button so people can actually copy it over into Dartpad? You're muted, Sergio.
Yeah, sorry. Actually, if you go to Dartpad, I will show that to you. 1 second. Too many tabs open. So when you go to Dartpad, in here at the right in samples, if you go to counter, it will pre-populate that sample for you. There are actually other samples that you can explore later as well that are very interesting. But for the one that we want is counter. So again, if you go here, that code for the main application will appear here on the left automatically.
Cool, thanks.
Just as a little help, I really will encourage to try to get it done by yourself. But if you get stuck, the solution is in this link that I'm sharing. The exercises that I want to go through, if we have time, that they are all there anyway. But try not to look until you get it really stuck. How is it going for everybody? Somebody got it, or you still need some more time? Okay, I guess that means maybe a few more minutes. All right. So how's it going? Anybody wants to share? Cool. I see somebody's done. Perfect. More people. Okay. So what we can do is, again, all the code will be shared. Just gonna show it again. So I have this small repository, and I had in mind 3 exercises. So I made them in different branches. So you will be able to see the code for each one of the exercises later if you want to, or if you get stuck. I shared on the chat the link is pointing to this first branch, but also the link is at the end of the slides, which will be shared later. So maybe we just move on to the next one, which is gonna be quick because I wanted to show you something related to componentization. But if you're using Dartpad, you're not gonna be able to use it. Oh, sorry, I think I wasn't sharing that part. This is the branches that I was making. Okay, so I'm presenting now. So yeah, as I said, there's the second exercise was related to componentization. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. And it's something that if you're using Dartpad, you cannot really do it because Dartpad is everything in one single file. So I'm gonna run it myself very quickly for you to understand what I mean, because this is a very common pattern in Flutter, and it's actually one of the main reasons why Flutter is so powerful. And as I said before, we can actually test widgets in Flutter individually. So you could have your own widgets slash components, right? Like you could have a card widget, which with already an image and a title and a subtitle. And you can actually test that component itself, only the component, which is very, very handy. But I guess first we need to know how to create those components. And this is a very, very, very common pattern in Flutter, because we use those components as building blocks. As you have seen, everything is a widget, right? Like text is a widget, row is a widget, floating item button is a widget. So we can have our own custom widgets and inject them in here. So we could have a text, but we could also have my card widget with certain properties. And I could reuse this widget everywhere. A very common pattern is to have a component folder. You may organize your project in a different way. To be honest, I'm not a fan of enforcing a directory architecture into anybody. Like, people feel more comfortable in different ways. I do have a components folder, and then I may have other subclasses as UI components, or components that are not purely UI, that may be helpers, or they do some processing around. Just for keeping it simple, we're going to have just a folder called components. And we're going to have our custom action buttons. What we're going to do is we're going to bring these ones. Actually, we're going to bring the row in there. So first thing, I need to create a new class, custom action buttons. It extends stateless widget. I need to override that build method, as we said before. And in this build method, I'm just going to return that row that we saw before. But we have some issues, right? Like this increment counter and decrease counter method, they don't exist in our new widget, so they need to be received as properties. And with Flutter, well, with Dart, actually, we can have functions as properties. So we are going to declare the functions in here on increase, and decrease. We're going to create a constructor, which I find it very funny in Flutter, well, in Dart, that the constructors are called const, because I always get confused with constants. Nevertheless, we have a constructor that receives a key, all of the constructors do. And we're going to receive two methods, two functions that are increase or decrease. And this is a super call for the key. There is a curious thing in Flutter. I don't exactly remember the rule right now. I believe if you have the bracket in here, your parameters will have the same name than the properties, right? But otherwise, I can have, I don't know, if this increase method parameter will be calling here increase, private increase, or on private increase, whatever. And I want to call it for when somebody uses this widget to have a pass a parameter called on increase. I could have changed that name. Well, there's a way of doing that. I just don't remember right now. Forgive me for that. I just wanted to let you know. I normally go along with this construction method. We just take these ones. We're ready to use our new custom actions button in here, which we need to import. So the Flutter plugin will add the import for us in here. Now, all this code that was starting to get too big is in its own widget that we can reuse. But we need to pass those methods. So now we'll have on increase, as I was saying. It's going to be the increase counter. And decrease is going to be the decrease counter. But it's not going to be the output of this method. It's going to actually be the method itself. So we don't need to use the brackets. So we're just basically passing the function as a parameter for a widget, and then we can use them in here. And that's how we componentize this. Maybe this is not the best example to componentize just a couple of action buttons that may not go in another screen, but it's just to illustrate the example that you may have some custom structures in here that you want to reuse, or maybe the code is just getting extremely nested and extremely long, and you want to make a component. Another way of maybe separating the code in here that doesn't involve componentizing will be to make a function that returns a widget. I don't know, my body, and then this can return text widget. So you could call my body. Ideally, you will return the center and everything, but for example, you could call this in here, and it will return that, right? So it can be a way to declutter a little bit some of the structures that you have in here. So that was the example that I wanted to show you, and I wanted to trying to do that, but unfortunately, since many of you are using Dartpad, it wouldn't be fair. Again, if you want to try it later, this is branch number 2, componentizing, and I have that component folder and so on in here. The next example I wanted to show you, and it's the last one, is to build something a little bit more complex, like a slider, but it's really, really easy on Flutter. So I'm gonna build it myself as well, and then it will be amazing if you're able to try. So what I'm gonna do, just gonna put the iOS application side by side. What I'm gonna do is to have I'm gonna add a widget in here under the text of the counter called slider. This widget already exists from the material components, and it has a certain properties, right? Like if we need to find more information about them, we just can come and click, and we will see it has a value for the current selected value for the slider, an unchanged method, unchanged star method, active color, inactive color, etc. Right? What I need at the moment is I'm going to give it a value that is going to be the value of our counter. I'm going to give it a minimum value of minus 100, a maximum value of 100. Ideally, you will have this in constants, right? Not in here, but just for the sake of it, a division of 200. So we're going to go from all the one by one for all the values between minus 100 and 100. A label is going to be the counter to a string. Our counter is an integer. And there's an unchanged method. Receives a value, it's a double. And we receive this value, we're going to set the state for our counter. We're going to set the value. There are a couple of things in here that we need to fix. Our counter is an integer, and we are receiving a double in the slider, and it uses a value that is a double. So Flutter, well, Dart is a very typed language. It's not. This could be valid in JavaScript, for instance, but it's not in here. So we actually need to convert the types to double. And in here, we can convert it to print. Another thing that we could do in here, it's not the case at the moment, but we could also run the value to make sure it's always going to be an integer. And if I save, we have our slider. We have the label of our slider that changes with the counter, and we move it. Our counter changes way, way faster, right?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So how do you know what are the properties of the different widgets? Like, for example, you just added a slider right now. How do you know it should take in a label? Do you always have to open the documentation?
Yes, the documentation is the way to go. And well, there's another resource that I will mention as well at the end, but Flutter has actually a very, very good documentation. It's probably the best documentation I have ever seen. It's not very, it's not only very extended, which has documentation for everything, but it actually have interactive samples. So my first place to go for me particularly will be to the documentation in the code, right? Which is already. But if you look for Flutter and a component, you'll have way more information. And not only that, but also an interactive sample in a dark path. This is what you are using right now. So you can actually see many of the properties that are there, right? And samples on how to use that. It goes very extensive. Even for something as a slider, it has documentation for everything. If you compare this to the documentation that you get in Android for iOS, this is worlds apart. It's incredible. The other thing is that there are many, many widgets. Look at this list here on the left. You can scroll, many widgets. I don't know half of them. And the people of Flutter knows this, right? So there is there are some YouTube videos, and one of them is called Widget of the Week, which has a playlist, and every week they go through it's like a 2-minute video of one of the widgets, very, very nicely explained. So safe area, expanded, wrap, animated container, opacity, which could be a property, but no, in this case, it's always a widget. Yeah, and this is a very good resource, to be honest. And I particularly discovered many of these widgets in here. And when they explain them, they will also show you the properties that they use. But again, I think the documentation that they have in their website is the place to go if you want some more concrete examples. The community is very active as well, so if you look for Flutter slider, you will probably find something around in Medium as well.
Okay, yep, thank you.
No worries. So going back to the example, there's a last thing that I want to show you, and is that I'm going to ask you to try to get this slider done, and this will be the last exercise. And I'm sorry we're already out of time as well. So feel free if you want to try it on your own time. That's all right as well. But if you get stuck now by any chance, I'm here for any question. But what I want to show you, the last thing, is that what happens when Flutter crashes, right? When there's an error, is what you see, and this is very common. So when there's a UI error, that's actually a very weird thing. Is there can be two things, right? One, you can see like a warning sign, and it's like part of the widget is overflowing out of the screen or something. So it shows you like a warning sign in here that looks like from a construction site. And the other thing is a red screen. So let's suppose we are at the end of our widget, our slider, minus 100. We have set the minimum value. The minimum value is minus 100, and we press minus in here. So obviously we want to minus 101. So you could see this red screen often, right? And this is mostly for errors that has happened during, well, it's only for errors that happen during runtime. You have completion times, completion errors. It will be shown in Visual Studio or Android Studio, and they look like this. There is not much more information about this, unfortunately. But I think it points very well, right? Like it tells you it's actually in the slider package, so it didn't even happen in our main Dart. It has happened in the slider component, and it's just a filet assertion where the value is just out of range. So I just wanted to show you that this is what happens when there is an error, right? They don't get any better than this. I mean, you probably, worst case, you may see a very long list of these kind of messages when it's across a very long stack. And this is one of the things that I think Flutter could do better, have more granularity in the errors to know exactly where it happens, because there's nothing pointing to me that it actually happens in this particular instance of the slider. But yeah, that's what I wanted to show you. So that was actually is the last exercise that I wanted to show you. Slides in here. Was this one? So I show you also the red screen of pain, as they call it. So you want to spend a few minutes trying to get the slider ready. I will be here around. It's also, as I said, in here in the branch number 3. Try not to look at it if you're doing the exercise, and just look at it at the end. Let me know if you want to do it now or whatever. I will be here for a little bit longer, and I can show the last slides with some of the resources and talk about them.
Sorry, Sergio. Hello?
Yeah.
Oh, hey, how's it going? Just wondering, if someone was using like Notepad++ and they wanted to save individual files, let's say class files or etc., what is the actual extension? I'm guessing it might be .f.
.dart.
.dart.
Yeah.
Ah, perfect. Thank you. And you?
No. So if people want to try the slider, maybe we'll give until 5 to 8, and we can do a quick wrap in 5 minutes to close at 8. Again, apologies for going over time on this.
No issues. So if you want, maybe you can continue and complete the slides, and people can still complete the task. And if they have any issues after the workshop, I can maybe just forward them to you, and that
Sure.
way we can run that out.
Yeah, my machine's running extremely slow. I don't know why, so I'll probably do it later on. Sorry, Sergio.
No worries. That's fine. Okay, so yeah, we can finish the slides then. Sharing the screen. Yeah. Okay, so well, well done for everyone. This is actually the first time that I do a workshop online. So I guess it's not the same experience that going around the tables, helping people and answer the questions. But I hope everybody enjoyed and got something out of it. There is a particular set of links that I like. The first one is the Flutter vignettes that I showed at the beginning, and I think these are extremely amazing examples of what you can do with Flutter. I will encourage everybody to try them, and after you can install them on your phone and see them, which is very impressive. It may require a higher level of experience with Flutter to feel confident looking around the samples. There is also I can open this link actually. In the Flutter Dev website, there's lots of information, and when you go to /community, they do have the links for all the communities that they have around. There's a Slack channel that maybe have too much noise, but it can be very handy for networking with other peers and dropping questions. I think the Medium publication that they have is really good. I do have also some articles there about Flutter and machine learning, so feel free to dig into them. It's with the same handle on Twitter that is on the slides. They have their Flutter channel on Twitter and the YouTube ones. I particularly don't dig into the Reddit and Discord ones, so neither Gitter, which I didn't even know until seeing this website. But yeah, feel free to choose your pick. The community is awesome. You will find lots of good information there. Particularly, these two links in here, the widget of the week and the boring Flutter development show, those are from their YouTube channel. The widget of the week is the one I mentioned before, where every week they show a 2-3 minute video of a widget, which is incredible for discovering new widgets that may not, you may haven't come across to them, and it's like, oh Jesus, this actually resolves many of the issues that I was trying to solve. And then the boring Flutter development show, I love this one. It is very long though. Every episode is like around 1 hour, but they built an app on live together, and they comment on other things, and you can see good practices done around them. Some of the things that they solve, they're very interesting, and some of the things that they do with the UI are also extremely interesting. So I do recommend watching them. You may feel that Flutter has changed a lot during these years, and some of the things around Flutter for state management, for instance, has changed a lot. So if you start watching this on the early videos, they may use some solutions for state management that are not the best ones at the moment, and you will see how it changed. But just bear in mind that some of the early episodes have been out there for 1 or 2 years already. Still, it's a very good resource. There are 2 courses as well. One is a Flutter bootcamp by Angela Yu, I think. And Google was actually sponsoring this one, and they gave it for free for a while. I think now it's $10, but it's really good. It really goes through some of the principles in Flutter and teaches you how to build some UIs. If you have already gotten some experience in Flutter, it may not be so relevant all the time, because it really goes from the ground up, but it's very good. And there's another this guy Andrea. He's a Google developer expert on Flutter. Has become very popular with their online courses as well. I haven't watched his courses though, but I have been following some of the blog posts that he has put, and they're really good, and it seems to be getting quite a good feedback from the courses. So if anybody wants to take a look for getting started with Flutter and Firebase and things like that, it's a very good place to go as well. And this is the link for the GitHub repo that I showed before. I put it on the chat though anyway. So those branches are there. Sorry, I hope they were good enough examples. I know they were not maybe the most exciting ones, but I think for our introduction workshop, it is enough. If we do something else later, we can get into more advanced UI changes. I wanted to leave time for the Q&A. I think we have asked some questions around. Feel free also to ask them. I would love to see if you build something. So please keep me posted. Besides, show me what you build. Give me your feedback, because I really would like to share the interest on Flutter along a little bit more. And as I said, this is the first online workshop I do, so there are probably things that I can do better, or maybe there are things that they were good enough to stay. So I would like to know if the samples were good enough, too easy, too difficult. Maybe we need to spend more time explaining some parts of the code and so on. I would love to hear it. If it is not direct to me, maybe you can send some feedback to Harsh, and he can get in touch with me. Okay, so that was all the presentation. If anybody has some more questions before finishing, this is your time.
That was very good, Sergio. You've done an excellent job. I actually have one kind of really, I suppose it's a question that's really standing in my mind, because this is basically a very new language. Is it only kind of compatible with new devices? Like, is there going to be any kind of backwards compatibility, for previous versions, etc.?
That's a good question. I actually don't know the answer per se, but there's just a small detail. Dart is actually not new. Dart is fairly, but it's not fairly old. I think it's from 2002 maybe. Let me see. Dart. I'm not sure if I'm still in the screen, but 2011. So it has 9 years. It's not the oldest, of course, but it's not new. It was a little bit forgotten because it was done to try to replace JavaScript, but apparently at some point Google didn't include the Dart VM into Chrome, so it just fell down until somebody started doing creating Flutter at Google, and they decided to use Dart, and now they have picked up the interest. So Dart itself will run pretty much everywhere. I think what your question refers is, what's the compatibility of Flutter with mobile devices? And I don't have a good answer to that because I'm not sure what's the lowest Android version where you can run Flutter.
I just looked up. It's Android SDK 16, so that's pretty old. So I think that should be good.
Yeah, I think it should work in most of the devices. The other issue though is how well it will work on them.
Very true.
There are things like, but back in the day, I did a lot of PhoneGap and React Native as well, and it will work in some devices, but some of them will be a terrible experience, I'm not sure how fluent it will work in an old device from a few years back, low Android device. I know with the current devices it works fairly well, and you may not achieve 60 frames per second the whole time. You may not need them in the whole applications. I know that now 120 hertz is the new thing, and mobile devices as well. I'm pretty sure Flutter will get there. Flutter itself has been out like two years only, so they're doing incredible performance improvements.
Good.
Yeah.
Right, thank you very much, Sergio.
No worries.
Anybody has any other questions? Doesn't seem like it.
Cool. Well, again, just feel free to reach me on Twitter for that. You have, and I'm happy to help anytime. Or if I don't know if you are working on an application Flutter and you're curious about something, just drop a line. Very happy to help.
So yeah, that was a really great workshop and was a great introduction to Flutter. And I've personally tried out Android development with Java and Swift for iOS, and I still think Flutter is much easier to learn, even though it may seem a bit overwhelming at the start.
Yeah, definitely. Seeing so many widgets at once is very overwhelming, but
I
it's
still
very
think
intuitive to be able to see the changes in real time. Know what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, I think you can still like get stuff done with Flutter much faster than going native.
Oh, yeah. Like I know next to nothing about Flutter, but I can tell you it looks way simpler than Java and Swift.
So yeah, thanks a lot, Sergio, for the workshop, and I will let you know the feedback from the members of the group. And this session was also recorded. I hope everything was fine with the recording. So I will share that with other members of the group, and we'll try to get feedback from them as well. So thank you so much. We are over time, but people are still with us, so I think that is a good sign.
Thank you, everybody, and again, apologies for going over time.
Thank you, Sergio.
Bye.
Okay.